Welcome everyone to Fire and Water, the podcast, where we are trying to support and cultivate wise leaders, one show at a time, maybe many shows at a time, and both in individuals as well as in groups of people. It's so much of the path and journey that Quinita, you and I are on and supporting and developing. It is, what's today? It's Tuesday. And we are on the eve of entering our third retreat with the Fire and Water cohort that we've been journeying with. It'll be 5 days together in a good online format with one another, modified for COVID purposes. And you know, what changes is maybe the medium through which we connect, and what doesn't change is the fact that we support all kinds of connection. We have two main themes that go with our Fire and Water program and that journey. One is the rite of passage, and the other is the leadership journey. And these dance together into something that we hope really moves people in their hearts and in their abilities. This is some of my language around that. So today we get to talk about just a little bit of that. And I know you put some thought into it and continued thought, and I put some continued thought into it. And I think today's episode, or maybe episodes if we get too long, just follow some of that.
Okay. Well, I think I want to start by, we've been talking about, the leadership and the rites of passage.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we take for granted when I see a lot of posts recently or hear people talking about, people aren't leaders because we have an idea of what qualities leaders have.
Mm-hmm.
Which for me, I think I come down to leadership just means people are following you.
Mm-hmm.
It says nothing about where you're taking them.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we can argue, I guess, even Donald Trump he's a good leader. I mean, he leads a lot of people, but I don't, that doesn't mean that he's a wise leader.
He's got a lot of followers.
He has a lot of followers,
yeah.
And if leadership is just people are following you, he has a lot of followers.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think we need to be more specific when we're talking about leadership. And that's why I say wise leadership.
Mm-hmm.
We have tons of leadership training programs. And I think that they have produced a lot of leaders.
Mm-hmm.
They haven't necessarily produced a lot of wise leaders.
Mm-hmm.
And so feeling that call personally,
mm-hmm.
and, us co-creating this journey.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the piece that gives us wise leadership is the initiation.
Mm-hmm.
It's that piece about us growing up and stepping more into our adult selves, not just getting older, but, growing up. And I think there's some wisdom in that.
Mm-hmm.
What about you?
Yeah, at this point in time, I feel like I'm revisiting what some things mean that we've been talking about for a long time, and lots of people talk about. So I find myself in a bit of reflection. It's like, well, what does leadership even mean anyway? A little bit of like, can I find my way back to the beginning, or back somewhere within me? And likewise with the rite of passage. And where I land with these two things, I like the way that you've linked them together, and we've done this within our Fire and Water program. When I, when I think of rite of passage, I still think of growing ourselves into a different way of being. And I like to think in terms of, frequency for that. Like there's a way in which, because of our learning, because of our experience, I'm talking about people in general right now, we find our way into like it's almost like a different vibration or a different frequency. And part of rites of passage work is, one, not only to get there, but then to try to help stabilize it there.
Mm-hmm.
So I like the things that we've emphasized in the initiatory journey around departure and ordeal and return. And I know that people from our program here and ourselves have, it takes some it takes something. It takes some guts and some courage and some community to be able to dare to depart from the norms that maybe aren't so helpful, and be willing to surrender into becoming something else. That it's used all of the time, of course, but the caterpillar surrendering into becoming a butterfly, I don't know what the caterpillar thinks and all of that. But it's quite a process when there is such a transformational change. I think we live in a time when we need that transformational change. So we're a group of people, like within our fire and water cohort, that I think has been supporting that layer of turning to butterfly kind of change. When I try to pull all of that down into something, into another way of speaking, and trying to find some simplicity and clarity in that, when I think of initiated folks, here we are thinking out loud, right? One of the things that comes up for me is I so love it when people are oriented to mystery. We don't have it all figured out. It's not a matter of just like rolling forward the assembly line of things. There's the people, many of the people that I love the most are somehow just already oriented or growing their orientation around mystery. There's a journey to be lived, not just, documented, let's say. When I think of some other things that go with that, it's almost easier for me to speak about. These are the people that I love, They usually have some orientation to a bigger picture. And they have that instinct to like look or follow the big picture of things. And of course, within big pictures, we also make choices in the day to day, but somehow being in an ease with both of those things at the same time matter. Some of the people that I love the most that, okay, now I'm naming as, they seem a little more initiated or have been through some stuff. I love it when we grow capacity for empathy. I love it when we grow capacity for love. You've heard me speak a number of times about kindness and consciousness and flow with life. There's a group of people that you and I work with who really emphasize, pastors these are, who emphasize a non-anxious presence in the midst of anything else that might be going on. When I think a stabilized frequency, i.e. through a rite of passage and initiation, I also come back to there's some sort of healthier relationship between what is masculine and what is feminine. Again, not being restricted to a particular body type. We all have a feminine in us. We all have a masculine in us. And the people that often the wise leaders that I see or seek to become like seem to have an attentive relationship to what is masculine and feminine, and how that, whatever that means out in the world of their doing, their being and their doing. All of those things, rite of passage. I know that you have put a lot of life into this.
Yeah. I remember years ago you asked me, so what's your first sign that somebody is initiated? And my answer to you then was that they get really clear on their purpose, on their unique genius, on what it is that they're bringing to the world. And I think that initiated adults, as opposed to our culture that's full of adolescent adults, initiated adults move more from being spirit-centered and led in their decision-making than being earth-centered and led in their decision-making. Now, it's not that we ignore the earthly things. It just doesn't lead. So it's not that we don't have moments where we're not afraid. We just don't let the fear lead in our choices. And it's the ability, first of all, to stop enough to recognize, to be able to recognize when you are in fear, to then make the choice. Am I going to let this make my choice for me, or am I not?
Bigger picture, a bit of enhanced inner awareness.
Yes. And so, it's this this piece, I think it's how do we, when we move from a place, I guess I'll say, from being spirit and centered and led, as opposed to being earth centered and led, then there's an alignment that happens.
Mm-hmm.
When we move from a place of being earth centered and led instead of spirit centered and led,
Mm-hmm.
we'll betray our upper spirit
Mm-hmm.
piece, our intuition, we'll betray our choice and our own voice, we'll betray our divine guidance, and we'll even betray the global heart that we carry with us.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's how do we move more and more to that place?
Mm-hmm.
And you know, one of the reasons we started this is that it's moving our culture from so much of adolescent adult to initiated adult, so that then we have people who can become initiated elders, and then initiated elders can initiate the youth. But when you don't have initiated adults, you lose that cycle. The other thing that I think is that when, you know, one of the most underutilized resource in the world is our uninitiated adults. Because when we have initiated adults, because we each come with a unique genius, I believe we could solve every issue on the planet if we initiated all of the adults, because I think we're given everything we need. Nature gives us what we need. And so, you know, it's our most underutilized resource. So for me, and us starting to initiate adults, but then at some point have the opportunity to step into initiated elders, and then can start initiating the youth, it starts to turn the tide for us.
Yeah. Okay, so big question.
Yeah.
And I follow the logic of that, or I follow the logic of that. We need initiated adults. Here we are, Fire and Water, where you create a rite of passage that is based on some initiation.
Yes.
How do you summarize or, you know, simplify even the possible deliberate initiatory moments so that we can have all those adults and more utilize those resources and create a better world?
Yeah.
What
So
do you think?
are you asking like, because there's lots of different initiatory times in our life, right?
Yeah.
So are you asking kind of which one I think we're taking on?
Yeah, I'm sort of trying to pull it down into our Fire and Water.
Yeah. So because there's an initiation that happens when you turn 2 and everybody starts saying me, right? But what we're looking at is moving from the adolescent adults to initiated adult stage. And so, you know, I think that one of the things is there comes a point, and I think like you were talking about vibrational layer, where I often will say that grace is given to the young and the ignorant, and there comes a point where you can't claim either. And so there comes a point where we grow enough that it's time for us to grow up, you know, and for me, in some ways, our program, because we have adults who are coming to it, we're behind the curve. So we're not doing initiation at a time that I'll put in quotes, should happen for each of us. You know, I don't know if that answers the question you're asking, but.
Well, I'm just trying to think of how this happens. So in Fire and Water, one of the things that I would name a few things that I think are part of creating a powerful journey.
Yes.
One is, well, we're not doing it alone. In our Fire and Water group, we have 16 people. There is a community. We put them into the structure of small groups as well as the whole cohort. We've created and invited some patterns of minimal critical connection.
Yes.
In other words, you know, we use Basecamp as our online platform, check into Basecamp.
Yeah.
We've encouraged monthly small group cohort calls. We've had every other month whole group calls. So there's all of those things create a little bit of skin in the game. And also we've done it over time. This is a 16-month plus, if you think about all of our organizing for it. It's not, oh, I went to a workshop today and it's done and then gone. You know, this lands in people in 16 months in a different way than it would if it were just a day of connection or something like that. I'm trying to think of the ways that people are so moved by an experience that it's unforgettable. Now, I've been in many, you have also, in many different people gatherings, workshops, 3-day things, face-to-face things, and online that change who we are. Like, it's almost like you can't walk away from it and feel like you're the same person that you are when you walked in. Now, that's a hopeful message. I love it when there's that kind of change. And I've seen it enough to happen, like to recognize it and go, yay, that's good. A comparison for me is, I'm going back to nature for a minute. If you see, people talk about the Grand Canyon this way,
Yeah.
You see the Grand Canyon and then you realize, oh my gosh, I am a small part of such a bigger thing, or a majestic thing, or a beautiful thing. And there's ways in which you don't just leave the Grand Canyon and say, well, let's get back to work, time to count the widgets and something like that. It's like your being is changed. I think that by the structural things and the energetic intent that you and I have, offered, with a few basic things, we will find each other in community. We will continue to meet each other in our questions, in our wondering, in our wandering, in our struggles, sometimes in our tears, sometimes in our fisticuffs. We'll stay together in a path that requires connection and learning in a way that just like changes us from the belly out.
Yes. And I would add one more thing, because there are communities where that is happening.
Right.
I mean, we know communities that we're involved with that's happening, and initiation still isn't happening. And I think this is why the eldering is important, is because you can't initiate yourself. You can't even initiate yourself in a group. You have to have an elder to hold you in that journey, because you can't take yourself someplace you haven't been. And it's the piece that our culture has lost. We've lost the understanding of elders or spiritual guides on this journey. And what it is the journey, I believe, is, Bill Plotkin talks about the journey to the collective spirit, to what we call spirit, is a masculine journey. It's an ascending journey. The journey to the individual soul, which is where initiation happens, is a feminine journey. It's a descending journey. And so both men and women have to be initiated through the feminine. Now, that doesn't mean that men are initiated through women. It's just the feminine. Like we said, it's not, body type. But in that descent that happens in the feminine, you have to be held in it, because you will never go all the way to the bottom of it where you need to go to get initiated, because we're all afraid we'll drown in it.
Right.
And so you have to have someone you trust enough that when you start to go down, when they say stay, you'll stay, or you'll keep going. If you're just with mates or friends, then when you go down, you feel like I need to come back up, you're not going to trust them enough to keep going. And so this piece about having elders to help hold the space for your journey is really important.
Go one step further with that. Elders hold us in the journey.
Yes.
Yay. And you just referenced, like, stay down, deep in the pool. Translate an example of that, if you can, into what that looks like with people. What does it look like when an elder holds someone?
Okay, so much of this journey is actually us trying to dismantle the patriarchy.
Yeah.
In the growing up, because the patriarchy is trying to keep us as adolescents. And so what happens, like after our first retreat, our people went back and they started to, feel some of their own ordeal and struggle in the journey. And they immediately kind of went in and got real quiet. As opposed to, I think I went on base camp at that point, and I'm like, no, we just talked about you all need each other. You have to be connected. Don't go in, reach out to people, share where you're going through. You don't have to
shut off.
Yes, exactly.
Right? Is that what you're saying?
That's our inclination when we have struggle, is to go and struggle alone and figure it out, instead of to reach out and know that we're not alone and we don't have to be.
Yeah.
And so even that, like that, direction
Mm-hmm.
from the elder who can see. And I mean, like the whole group was doing, right? Because all of a sudden base camp got really quiet. And also that because we want to rush through it. You know, we want to rush through what we think is the ordeal, because of course nobody wants to stay in that. It's not comfortable.
Right. So the elders, one of the things that an elder can offer is like the witness of, I know you are confused as hell.
Yes.
I know you might even feel angry. I know you might even be pissed at me.
Yes.
But I know enough to know that there is value in that place you are sitting right now.
Yes.
Stay with it.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Like there's that kind of encouragement.
Yes. And there's a piece,
because you're going to find gold within yourself here or within your community, right?
Yes. And there's a piece of feeling abandoned in that space.
Yeah.
Because you're not holding on to what you used to have, but you haven't quite grabbed onto what you're going to get. And so it's this middle kind of in between space that you just feel like floating in, and it's so uncomfortable that we do want to grab a hold of what we know to kind of anchor ourselves. But part of the job of elder is to encourage you to stay in the surrender. The longer you can stay in that surrender, the more gold you can bring back.
There's that poem that you and I both know. I'm trying to find it really quickly here, but I'm not sure I can find it. Oh, this might be it. By, actually, I'm not sure who this is by, but I've heard it attributed to Hafiz, the Sufi poet. It's called Absolutely Clear. Don't surrender your loneliness so quickly. This is speaking to it, right? Don't surrender your loneliness so quickly. Let it cut more deep. Let it ferment and season you. As few human or even divine ingredients can. Something missing in my heart tonight has made my eyes so soft, my voice so tender, my need of God absolutely clear. Especially in the first two paragraphs of that, around don't surrender your, I know you want to surrender that loneliness, but don't surrender it so closely, you know, let it ferment you. I think what that means is, oh well, boy, it's not easy to stay in the fermenting.
No, not at all.
We need
for
community,
any of us.
We need elders.
Yes.
That's what I hear.
Yes. And we need elders that we trust.
Yeah.
Because if you don't trust your elder, you're not going to stay in that, you know, like you're going to rush out. And so you have to have elders that you trust. But I think because we've all been living with the toxic masculinity, when we think of surrender, we think of terms of surrendering to the toxic masculinity. So nobody wants to do it. But that's not what surrendering
that's hot
is.
stove memory.
Yes,
right?
exactly.
I've been burned that way before.
Exactly. Yeah. But elders can see themselves. So of course they can see you. And so it's different. It's not just olders, it's elders. Yeah. And because we have gotten confused, or because we've had so few of them, you know, or haven't had the experience ourselves, or felt like we've had the experience of being eldered well, then we don't trust it. And there's this, you know, and I think the surrendering to an elder helps to teach us how to surrender to God. You know, it's like, because most of us can't take God's, you know, straight on right away. And so there's the spiritual guides that helps us.
The warm up.
It is. It's like, you know, it's a practice. It's like, you know, you don't start running, you know, 10 miles. You start small. And this is a way to start building that muscle, because what happens when you do it is you start to, we don't always start off with faith, but as you start to do it more and more, it builds your faith so that you can surrender to the bigger things.
So yay for all of this. And maybe we can tuck it in for now and then come back to another little recording here. You okay with that?
Yeah, that's good.
My tucking in would be, I'm going to go back to where I started here, is that I think somewhere in this description that you and I are offering and living with some, you know, beautiful people, rites of passage. I think what grows out of a rites of passage, that kind of, you know, soul work, is there's some part of us in the inner that is forever changed. Doesn't mean there isn't regression. You know, that's always possible. But there's some part of our being that is changed. that has a way of reshaping how we look, do, taste, touch, feel, all of the doing that is part of the world. So anytime that we can create some, or maybe it's like call forward the memory and the instinct in ourselves and in other people for that, deep belonging and deep being, it's a good thing. One of the other elder kind of people that you and I have both been paying attention to is Stephen Jenkinson. And I love the way that he describes in a couple of his podcasty kinds of things, his hope that he's helped to create some wonderment. Mm-hmm. And I think I feel that today as you and I are talking and getting to record this and share it out with others, that there's maybe just a little extra wonderment that people feel, that any of us feel, that welcome the possibility of these kind of deep changes that we're talking about. How about you? Other closing thought or tucking?
Yeah, I would just say, as we're entering into this time of our final retreat with the folks that we've been journeying with, mm-hmm. I would just say that the rites of passage, mm-hmm. the closing of this part of the journey, mm-hmm. is actually the opening of their initiated adult stage. So it's not that, they leave and they have it all, right? Mm-hmm. It's that now the journey starts to unfold and more, and they get to start choosing more and more to move from being spirit-led mm-hmm. in their decision-making than earth-led in their decision-making. Mm-hmm. And I think that's important because the rites marks an event. It marks an opening, that's a doorway.
Good. Yeah.
It's not that, we got it, right? It's a journey, and especially in a culture that we want things so instant, mm-hmm. So I'm just excited, especially mm-hmm. in this time mm-hmm. that we have, and in our world and all the changes that are shifting and the challenges that people have, mm-hmm. to move to a place of being earth-centered and led in your decision making takes courage. Mm-hmm. And when you go through the experience, like you were talking about, you go through an experience that changes you, mm-hmm. you can't not know what you know. Mm-hmm. And that piece then starts to, I think, shape mm-hmm. not only you, but what shows up for you mm-hmm. as well.
Yeah, and it's like you got a new set of tires. You can do some things with these new tires now.
Yes.
The roads might even come to you.
Yes.
All right. Thank you for the conversation today.
You're welcome.
Super. For those, thank you for you, the listener, who continues to tune in, or if you're tuning in for the first time. There's all kinds of journey that I love being able to continue to create and support. For more information, some of the places to go to, we have our shared website at fireandwaterleadership.weebly.com. You can just Google and get curious, and you're probably going to find that one. Quinita, you've got your website, nizuzu.com. I've got mine, tennysonwolf.com. Thanks, everyone. It's good to be in the journey with you.